None of you speak Arabic. How are we supposed to conduct business with other companies if you cannot communicate?
The janitor's son claims 9 languages, and the billionaire laughs, blinded by wealth. But the teen holds a secret. "I speak 9 languages," said Leo Reyes, the 14-year-old son of the cleaning woman. Omar Al-Zahidi, the Arab millionaire, threw his head back and roared with laughter. It was a loud, booming sound that bounced off the polished Italian marble and the glass walls of the Manhattan penthouse office. "Ha ha ha ha! 9 languages! Kid, you can barely speak English without an accent I can hear from here." Omar's laughter, full of the confidence that 3.5 billion in oil money buys, cut through the silence like broken glass. It was the sound of a powerful man thoroughly amused by what he saw as pathetic arrogance. Leo Reyes, just 14, stood utterly still in the middle of the luxurious office. He was wearing clothes that looked neat but well worn, and he clutched a heavy public school backpack. The wealth surrounding him, the custom, temperature-controlled furniture, the million-dollar view of the city, the modern art that probably cost more than his family's entire apartment building, was overwhelming. But despite the stinging humiliation that made his cheeks burn hot, his dark eyes remained steady and clear, locked on the tycoon. Beside him, his mother, Elena Reyes, gripped a yellow plastic cleaning bucket so tightly her knuckles were white. Elena, 42, was trembling. She knew, with a sick certainty that tightened her stomach, that she had made a catastrophic mistake bringing her son to work with her today. It was a desperate move. Leo's school was closed for a teacher workday, and she couldn't afford to miss this shift. But now it was blowing up in her face. Omar Al-Zahidi, 48, was thoroughly enjoying himself. The oil tycoon, who ran a massive global empire, had been having a frustrating week of negotiations and bureaucratic headaches. This small moment of absolute dominance over the son of his cleaning lady was, to him, the best entertainment he'd had in a long time. This black kid, whose mother earned minimum wage scrubbing his floors, had just claimed mastery over 9 languages when Omar had mentally doubted the boy could even read a college-level book in his native tongue. "Leo, please, apologize to Mr. Al-Zahidi right now," Elena whispered, her voice a thin, shaky thread. It was heavy with the weight of years of submission, of keeping her head down, of the desperate fear of losing the one steady job that supported her and her 2 children entirely on her own. She feared Omar's mood more than anything, knowing how easily he could erase her from the payroll. "No need to apologize, Grace," Omar corrected, using the wrong name for Elena, a minor cruelty he often deployed to show he hadn't bothered to remember her name in 5 years. "Grace, I want to hear more of this magnificent fantasy. Tell me, boy wonder, what are these 9 languages you claim to speak? Did you invent them all?" Leo took a slow, deep breath, tasting the dry, air-conditioned air of the office. At 14, he had already learned a hard, bitter truth about the world. People like him and his mother were judged, measured, and dismissed long before anyone bothered to learn their names. Son of a cleaning lady, black, living in the Bronx. These were all labels. Labels that men like Omar used to justify their immediate, dismissive contempt. They didn't see a person, they saw a category. English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, and Portuguese, Leo replied, his voice level and clear. He didn't rush the list. He spoke each name with the precision of a professional giving a presentation. The clarity of his voice made Omar's booming laughter stop completely, mid-syllable. The sudden silence was shocking. Omar straightened up from his desk chair, a flicker of something unreadable, maybe surprise, maybe suspicion, crossing his face before he managed to mask it. "Liar," Omar declared, recovering quickly. He walked back to his massive desk, made of sleek, dark Italian marble. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Robert, hold all my calls for the next 20 minutes. This is too rich to interrupt." He looked down at Elena. "Grace, your son has serious fantasy issues. Maybe you should take him to a psychiatrist instead of bringing him here to contaminate my workspace." Elena bowed her head, the weight of the familiar, crushing humiliation settling over her shoulders like a lead cloak. For 5 years, she had meticulously cleaned this office, enduring countless small, derogatory comments, and accepting the low wages because she was trapped by the sheer necessity of the job. But seeing her son, her brilliant, determined, and deeply private Leo, being ridiculed in this openly cruel manner, that was a pain that cut deeper than any personal insult she had ever received. It was a violation of her greatest pride. "Mom," Leo said softly, reaching out and gently touching her arm. His touch was comforting, steady. "It's okay. Let him have his fun." Omar watched the simple interaction, the quiet strength of the son comforting the mother, with a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. He loved these moments. They were perfect demonstrations of his absolute power, moments when he could remind people exactly where they stood in the brutal social hierarchy he believed in. He hadn't just built his massive multi-billion-dollar empire through brilliant business acumen. He had reinforced it through a calculated cold cruelty that was designed to break and destroy anyone who ever dared to question his superiority. "You know what I think, Grace?" Omar leaned back into the thick, supple leather of his $15,000 executive chair, his hands clasped behind his head. "I think your son is jealous. He's jealous of my executive's children who attend those expensive private preparatory schools on the Upper East Side. So he fabricates these elaborate fantasies about speaking 9 languages just to feel special, a common defense mechanism for children who know they're missing out." "Sir," Leo interrupted, stepping slightly forward. His voice remained calm, but it now carried a quiet, unmistakable dignity that made Omar pause, surprised by the boy's refusal to be intimidated. "Do you speak Arabic?" Omar frowned, adjusting his silk tie. "Of course I do. It's my mother tongue. I was raised speaking it." "Then you would understand if I said, 'In al-haqiqa laysa laha tarjama'?" The silence that followed was instant and absolute, a heavy presence in the luxurious room. Omar Al-Zahidi froze, his confident sneer vanishing. He stared at Leo, his brain struggling to process the flawless string of words he had just heard. The boy hadn't just spoken Arabic, he had spoken classical Arabic, the formal language of literature, law, and diplomacy. The phrase, "In al-haqiqa laysa laha tarjama," meaning, "the truth has no translation," was delivered with impeccable pronunciation, perfect grammar, and a linguistic formality that was simply staggering. This wasn't the basic tourist-level Arabic that anyone could memorize from a phrasebook. It was complex, advanced, and profoundly well-placed. Elena looked back and forth between her son and the billionaire, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't understand what Leo had said, but she felt the dramatic shift in the atmosphere. The heavy, humiliating air had suddenly become charged with an electric tension. "Where?" Omar asked, his voice low and guttural. He was genuinely confused, perhaps for the first time in many years. "Where in God's name did you learn that kind of Arabic?" Leo smiled for the first time since he had entered that hostile office. It was a small, triumphant, but not malicious smile. "At the public library, sir. They have free advanced language programs every afternoon for anyone who bothers to sign up." Omar felt a strange, cold sensation bloom in his chest. It was a mixture of utter, profound surprise and a small, uncomfortable feeling that might have been respect. No. He immediately crushed the thought. Respect for a kid? Impossible. He's just a clever boy who memorized a few difficult sentences. "Anyone can memorize a phrase," Omar challenged, trying desperately to reassert the control he had so obviously lost. He needed to push back, to prove this was just a trick. "That doesn't mean you actually speak the language?" "You're absolutely right, sir," Leo agreed, nodding calmly. His agreement made Omar even more irritated. "That's exactly why I brought this." Leo slid the worn public school backpack off his shoulder and opened it carefully. He reached inside and pulled out a stack of documents that made Omar's breathing hitch. The top document was an official certificate of proficiency in multiple languages issued by a renowned institution, not quite Columbia University, but a prestigious, recognized language institute associated with a major New York university. The certificate clearly listed all 9 languages Leo had mentioned, with grades indicating fluency at a professional, working level. "That's fake," Omar stammered, his voice losing its arrogant conviction and wavering slightly. He knew deep down that it wasn't. The paper looked too official, too expensive. Leo didn't argue. He simply produced another piece of paper. This is my certificate from the Advanced Linguistics program at the Municipal Library downtown. And this, he pulled out a third sheet, is the completion certificate from the online simultaneous translation course I finished last month. It was a scholarship program. Omar took the documents with hands that were now noticeably trembling. He held them up to the light, checking the embossed seals and signatures. They were all terrifyingly authentic, stamped and signed by reputable, recognized institutions. This 14-year-old kid, the son of the woman he paid to empty his trash, had achieved a level of education and measurable, validated proficiency that rivaled seasoned professional diplomats and highly paid corporate executives. How, was all Omar could whisper, the words sounding hollow and defeated in his own mouth. How is this possible? What Omar didn't know, what Leo hadn't yet shown him, was that the boy had a secret far more significant than simply being fluent in 9 languages. And that secret was poised to shatter everything Omar believed about intelligence, merit, and the actual value of a human being. Omar examined the certificates for several agonizing minutes, his eyes darting across the seals, searching wildly for even a tiny shred of evidence that this was a forgery, a scam, a lie. But the more he looked, the more his once rock-solid arrogance melted away, replaced by a growing, sickening sense of panic. The signatures were valid, the stamps official, and the dates clearly indicated a consistent, intense 3-year academic progression. This still doesn't prove anything, Omar muttered, trying to salvage his pride, speaking more to himself than to Leo. Anyone can take online courses and get a piece of paper. You're right, Leo agreed instantly, the same unnerving calmness in his tone. This lack of defensiveness made Omar even more uncomfortable. That's why I brought this. Leo took out a small, sleek tablet from his backpack, a relatively old model, but well cared for. He opened a video chat application. Within seconds, the screen came alive, showing the smiling face of an Asian woman in a very official-looking academic office filled with books. Professor Wei, Leo said, his voice now switching seamlessly and perfectly into rapid, fluid Mandarin. The complex tones and inflections were flawless. Could you please confirm to Mr. Al-Zahidi my performance in your business translation course? The woman on the screen immediately replied, her voice crackling slightly through the speaker, speaking just as quickly and fluently in Mandarin. Leo responded, they exchanged several complicated-sounding sentences, and the conversation flowed with a natural rhythm, completely foreign and unreadable to Omar. Omar couldn't understand a single word, but he could hear the impossible truth. The natural flow of the conversation, the highly complex grammatical structures, the sheer effortless ease with which Leo moved between linguistic registers. This wasn't a party trick. This was mastery. Mr. Al-Zahidi, the professor finally switched to crisp, precise English, her face still on the screen. Leo has been my best student in 15 years of teaching. At 14, he is fluent in Mandarin like a native of Beijing. He is, simply put, extraordinary. A natural genius. Omar reached out and jabbed the end call button on the tablet with a shaky finger. The screen went dark. His hands were now visibly shaking, and his carefully composed face had turned pale. Grace, he said, his voice strangely flat and distant. Elena, he corrected himself, actually using her real name for the first time. Did you know about all of this? Elena shook her head, still trying to catch up with the impossible reality unfolding before her eyes. Leo has always been smart, sir, she managed to whisper. But I didn't know he was doing this for 3 years. I started when I was 11, Leo gently interjected, looking at his mother with reassuring warmth. My mom was working 2 jobs to try and pay for a private school near us, but she lost her second job during the recession. When I went back to the public high school, the classes, they were too easy. I finished the assignments in the first hour, so I decided to use all that free time for something useful instead of just playing video games. A heavy knot twisted in Omar's stomach. He thought about his own 2 children, who attended the most expensive preparatory school in New York, costing him over $100,000 a year, supplemented by private hourly tutors for everything from calculus to classical guitar. And yet, this boy, using nothing more than public libraries, free online courses, and sheer burning determination, had achieved a level of education that no amount of money could automatically buy. But why languages? Omar asked, truly curious now, shedding the last vestiges of his contempt. Why not coding? Or finance? Something more lucrative? Because I wanted to understand the world, Leo replied simply, shrugging slightly. And because I realized that when you speak to people in their language, they stop seeing you as a stranger or a label. They stop seeing you as an object of pity or scorn and start seeing you as an equal human being. The observation landed squarely in Omar's gut like a physical punch. For years, Omar had used his own Arab background, his language, his cultural identity, as a shield, a reason to maintain a frosty distance from his American and European employees. He had constantly cited cultural differences, when the truth, he now saw with brutal clarity, was simply his own deep-seated arrogance and fear of connecting on a human level. Leo, Omar said slowly, his voice laced with the heavy realization of his mistake. You're only 14 years old. This is utterly impossible. Sir, Leo smiled, the triumphant glow back in his eyes. The impossible is just the possible that hasn't happened yet. Omar finally turned and looked at Elena. For the first time in 5 years of paying her to clean his waste, he actually saw her. He saw a woman who had quietly raised a certified genius while working a back-breaking low-wage job. A woman who had sacrificed everything to give her son opportunities she never had. Leo, Omar said, his tone utterly transformed, softened by a strange new respect. Why did you come here today? Why reveal all this? Your mother could easily lose her job for this kind of intrusion. Leo and Elena exchanged a quick glance, and Elena gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The silent communication was clear. You started this. Now finish it. Because I overheard you on the phone yesterday, Leo said, his calm voice cutting through the tension. You were discussing a massive contract in Arabic with investors from the Middle East. You made a couple of subtle mistakes that, if they went unnoticed, could cost your company millions of dollars. Omar went ice cold. He turned pale, his face draining of blood. What? What kind of mistakes? What are you talking about? You used the word mubashir, when you should have used ajil, to convey the critical urgency of the situation, Leo explained, speaking Arabic words with the same precise academic tone. Mubashir means direct or live. Ajil means urgent or immediately necessary. That subtle difference completely diluted the deadline pressure you were trying to apply. He continued without pause. And you confused the verb miraik, which relates to the process of sighting or aiming, with miraib, which relates to doubt or suspicion, when discussing the contractual deadlines for the next phase. You essentially communicated that the deadlines were suspicious instead of critical to meet. Small, almost invisible linguistic blunders that, put together, completely changed the emotional and legal meaning of your pitch. Omar sat down heavily on the edge of his chair. He remembered the call perfectly. The investors had seemed confused, even hesitant, during that part of the conversation. He had arrogantly dismissed it, attributing their confusion to a poor connection or their own lack of business savvy. In reality, his own linguistic blunders, minor as they were, had very nearly sabotaged a potential $50 million deal. How did you know I was making mistakes like that? Omar asked, his voice now barely a whisper. The arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate professional fear. Because I've been studying advanced business Arabic for 2 years, Leo replied. It's my specialty. I study the language of power and finance in those regions. Omar looked at Leo with truly new eyes. This wasn't just a smart kid. This was an unexpected world-class expert in international business communication, packaged inside a 14-year-old body. Leo, Omar said, the words heavy with disbelief. You saved my business without me even knowing it was in danger. Actually, Leo said, reaching back into the old backpack one final time. He pulled out a crisp, professionally formatted document. I did more than just point out the mistakes. Omar took the paper with trembling hands. It was a detailed 20-page proposal for restructuring global communications. The proposal meticulously identified linguistic flaws and cultural missteps throughout the company's recent international transactions, detailing exactly how those patterns had cost them millions in lost contracts and stalled negotiations. Then it suggested specific, implementable solutions. You analyze my entire company? Omar whispered, flipping through the pages in a daze. Just your public communications, sir, Leo clarified. Press releases, transcribed public statements, online documents. I found recurring patterns of mistakes that correlate perfectly with the documented loss of several major international contracts over the past 3 quarters. The data is clear. Your communication strategy is structurally flawed. Omar read the introduction again, his eyes flying over the text. It wasn't just good, it was brilliant, detailed, and completely actionable. It was a document worth potentially hundreds of millions in recovered and secured contracts. Why did you do this? Omar asked, completely confused by the boy's motivation. Why put in this immense effort for a man who just mocked you? Leo took the deepest breath yet. Because I wanted to show you, Mr. Al-Zahidi, that real value isn't about the size of your parents' bank account or the zip code where you were born. It's about what you can contribute. It's about merit, not inheritance. Omar felt something fundamental inside him finally snap. For decades, he had lived by the assumption that success was hereditary, that true intelligence was a privilege reserved for the wealthy and the connected. This boy, standing before him with his worn backpack and his impossible knowledge, had just delivered a devastating empirical argument that completely shattered that lifelong belief. Omar Al-Zahidi, Leo said, using the billionaire's full name for the first time, not with arrogance, but with the quiet authority of an equal. Can I ask you one question, and I want you to answer it honestly? Omar could only nod, suddenly feeling very small in his huge, expensive office. If a kid like me can accomplish this much, be fluent in 9 languages and analyze your multi-billion-dollar company, using only free public libraries and a cheap tablet, what could other young people like me achieve if they had the same opportunities that your own children have? The question hung in the vast, silent air of the penthouse like a ticking bomb. Omar didn't know it yet, but Leo's technical demonstration was just the warm-up act. Hidden deep inside that beat-up backpack was a final piece of evidence that would prove Omar had lost contracts, not just because of linguistic incompetence, but because of something far, far worse, his own bigotry. And Leo was about to use that evidence in a way that would permanently flip the balance of power in that office. Omar was still struggling to process Leo's devastating moral question when the boy reached into his backpack one last time. He pulled out a small, professional-grade digital voice recorder. The sight of it made the billionaire's blood run instantly cold. "Before I let you answer my question," Leo said, his voice now low and utterly serious, "I need to show you exactly why I believe your company is failing." Leo pressed the play button. Omar Al-Zahidi's unmistakable voice filled the silent office, amplified by the tiny device. "These black Americans are all the same, lazy, uneducated, always blaming others for their own failures. That's why I only hire Arabs and whites for any important executive positions. If they're not white, I don't trust their judgment." Elena gasped, covering her mouth with her hand in absolute horror. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, raw realization of the injustice she had always suspected. Omar Al-Zahidi instantly turned pale, his complexion matching the white of his expensive desk. Where in God's name did you record this?" he stammered, his mind racing through the legal implications. "In the elevator last week, sir," Leo replied, his tone devoid of emotion, simply stating a cold fact. "You were talking to your vice president, Robert Chen, about your hiring policy regarding the new head of marketing. You didn't notice I was there, carrying cleaning supplies." Omar remembered the exact conversation. He had been coming down from the 48th floor with Robert Chen, arrogantly arguing about why they consistently failed to promote any black or Latino employees to the higher executive ranks. He had assumed carelessly that they were completely alone. "That's illegal!" Omar exploded, his panic turning to desperate anger. "You can't record private conversations in a workplace." "New York State is a unilateral consent state," Leo retorted instantly, quoting the law with the detached precision of a seasoned lawyer. "Completely legal, sir. You were in a public elevator, and the recording was made by a person present in the conversation's vicinity. And considering that this recording perfectly documents a policy of systematic, structural racial discrimination in hiring and promotion, I'm quite certain the Department of Labor and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission would be extremely interested in hearing it. Omar felt the luxurious penthouse office spin around him. A recording like this, clear, undeniable, and directly linking the CEO to systemic bias, could utterly destroy his company's reputation, result in multi-million-dollar class action lawsuits, and permanently ruin his standing in the global business community. The value of this tiny digital recorder now exceeded the value of the entire office suite. "What do you want?" Omar whispered, his voice broken, realizing he had just been checkmated by a boy. Leo smiled. It wasn't the small, respectful smile from before. This was a calculating, cold smile, the smile of someone who had planned every single move of a very complex chess game and was now delivering the final, decisive blow. "I want you to make a choice, Mr. Al-Zahidi," Leo said, walking right up to Omar's massive Italian marble desk and placing his analysis proposal on top of it. "You can continue to believe that people like me and my mother are inherently inferior, that we are lazy and uneducated, and this recording will be on the desk of every labor lawyer, civil rights organization, and journalist in New York by 5 p.m. today." Omar swallowed hard, unable to speak. "Or," Leo continued, "you can prove, starting right now, that you genuinely learned something today. You have a chance to show the world that you are capable of changing." Leo took out a neatly typed, bound legal contract from his backpack. "I want 3 things, Mr. Al-Zahidi. First, I want you to promote my mother, Elena Reyes, immediately to the position of Facility Operations Supervisor, with a starting salary of $80,000 per year, plus full benefits and a 6-month performance-based bonus structure." Elena gasped again, this time in astonishment, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. $80,000 was more than triple what she currently earned. "Second," Leo continued, his eyes unwavering, "I want you to create and fully fund a young talent scholarship program for disadvantaged youth in the city, focused on language, linguistics, and high-level business training, utilizing the municipal libraries and other free educational resources, effective immediately." Omar looked around the room, feeling trapped. "And the third thing," he managed to choke out. "The third thing," Leo concluded, his voice ringing with quiet authority, "is that I want you to hire me as a junior language and communications consultant to your office. I will work remotely during school hours, but will be available for all critical multilingual translations and business communication analysis on a retainer. My retainer terms are outlined in the contract." "You're 14 years old," Omar protested, clutching the edge of his desk. The absurdity of hiring a 14-year-old in a professional capacity was overwhelming. "And I speak 9 languages with measurable proficiency in business communication, better than any adult you currently employ," Leo retorted without missing a beat. "Furthermore, I've already proven I can save your company tens of millions of dollars with one analysis. Your entire legal and financial future is currently hanging by the thread of this tiny recorder. Are you still going to argue about my age?" Omar's eyes darted from Leo's confident face to Elena, who stood taller now, silent, but her eyes shining with a deep, uncompromising pride that he had never once noticed in her before. "Elena," Omar said, his voice breaking with genuine, heavy emotion, "you have raised a genius." "I've raised a man," Elena corrected him firmly, her voice steady for the first time that day. Her dignity was now absolute. "A man who knows his own worth and will not accept being treated as less than he is." Leo pushed the contract across the desk. "I've already prepared the terms, Mr. Al-Zahidi. It's been vetted by a pro bono lawyer I consulted with earlier today. It includes ironclad clauses that protect both my mother and myself from any future retaliation. You have precisely 5 minutes to decide before this recording becomes public property." Omar snatched the contract with both hands. He skimmed the documents quickly. They were detailed, professional, and entirely fair, even bordering on conservative considering the immense value Leo could add to the company and the threat he represented. The boy had indeed thought of everything. "How do I know?" Omar asked, looking up, his expression desperate. "That you won't release the recording anyway, even if I sign?" "Because unlike you, Mr. Al-Zahidi," Leo said, meeting his gaze directly, holding nothing back, "I believe in giving second chances to people who show a genuine willingness to change and make amends." Omar leaned back, rereading the final page. The demands were a form of justice, a conservative price to pay for the peace and prosperity of his empire, but signing it meant admitting, on paper, that he had been fundamentally, morally wrong about everything he believed in. "What if I don't sign?" Omar challenged, though he already knew the answer. Leo calmly pulled out his personal cell phone. "This recording, along with my full analysis and the details of your discriminatory hiring practices, will be forwarded to the New York Times, CNN, and the State Attorney General's office in exactly," he glanced at the phone screen, 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "You're blackmailing me," Omar spat out, the last vestige of his old, proud self surfacing. "I'm offering you justice, sir," Leo corrected him instantly, never raising his voice. "You've spent years benefiting from a system that is fundamentally unjust. Now, you have a single chance to stop being part of the problem and start becoming part of the solution." Omar looked out the window at the endless glittering expanse of Manhattan, the city he thought he had conquered through sheer intelligence and ruthless cruelty. He saw clearly now that this 14-year-old boy had just outdone him on both counts. "Elena," Omar said, the name sounding foreign on his tongue, yet correct. "Do you accept this promotion?" Elena looked at Leo, who nodded strongly. "I accept, sir," she said, her voice full of a new, radiant strength. Omar picked up the solid gold pen from his desk, the one he only used for major contracts. His hand shook only slightly as he scrawled his signature across the bottom of the page. "Leo Reyes," Omar said, looking the boy in the eye, his gaze now heavy with an immense unwanted gratitude. "You have just taught me the single most expensive and most valuable lesson of my entire life." "What lesson was that, sir?" Leo asked. "That real intelligence," Omar replied, slowly putting the pen down, "isn't about where you were born or how many millions you have in your account. It's entirely about what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself and, more importantly, what you do with the power you possess." Leo put the digital recorder away, then calmly extended his hand across the desk to the billionaire. "Welcome to the 21st century, Mr. Al-Zahidi." Omar shook the boy's hand. It was a firm, confident grip. He felt deep down that he wasn't just signing an employment contract. He was agreeing to view the world and his place within it through completely different eyes. At that moment, Leo did something utterly unexpected. He reached into his backpack again and took out 2 more identical digital recorders. "Just for your information, sir," Leo said casually, without a hint of malice, placing the 2 recorders on the desk next to the contract. "Everything that happened in this room today, from your verbal agreement to you signing this contract of your own free will, was recorded on all 3 of these devices simultaneously." Omar stared at the 3 recorders, then at the boy. For the first time in his life, Omar burst out laughing, not a laugh of cruel mockery, but a laugh of genuine, open admiration and relief. "You are terrifyingly smart, kid," Omar admitted, shaking his head. "No," Leo smiled, picking up his backpack. "I just prepared better than you did." 6 months later, Omar Al-Zahidi was sitting at a slightly worn, round table inside the modest but bustling Bronx Public Library. He was surrounded by a small, eager group of young people from disadvantaged communities, all of whom were now participants in the Leo Reyes Young Talent Program, the scholarship initiative Leo had demanded. The oil tycoon who had once viewed public libraries as symbols of society's failure now considered them the true thriving centers of educational excellence. He had spent the morning discussing his own business journey with the students. "Mr. Al-Zahidi," asked Maria, a sharp 15-year-old Latina girl who was studying advanced Spanish literature, "is it really true that Leo got his first official job at age 14 by, essentially, blackmailing you?" Omar laughed easily, a genuinely warm sound this time. He was dressed in a comfortable, high-quality sweater and slacks, looking more like a professor than a CEO. "It is absolutely true, Maria," he confirmed, "and I can tell you, without a doubt, it was the best thing that has ever happened to me or my company." Leo, now 15 and officially the youngest language and communications consultant in American corporate history, sat at a desk nearby. He was quietly reviewing a complex set of international contracts. The stakes were still high, in the millions, but he looked up, listening to the conversation with a knowing grin. In just 6 months, Leo's immediate corrections to Omar's communication flaws, combined with his detailed strategy for culturally appropriate business outreach in several global markets, had generated an extra $200 million in new, secured business for Al-Zahidi Industries. His retention had become non-negotiable. "Tell them the whole story, Mr. Al-Zahidi," Maria insisted, leaning forward. Omar looked across the room at Elena. She no longer wore the modest, tired clothes of a cleaner. She was dressed in sharp, elegant business suits and moved with the confident gait of an executive. As the facility operations supervisor, she had revolutionized the efficiency and management of Omar's entire international real estate portfolio, proving that her attention to detail extended far beyond simply cleaning. She smiled at him, a wide, encouraging grin, urging him to continue. "6 months ago," Omar began, speaking to the group, "I was, to be perfectly frank, a rich but completely miserable man. I genuinely believed that my money, my family name, and my penthouse office made me fundamentally superior to other people. I mistook privilege for intelligence." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Then Leo showed me the truth. He demonstrated that true intellectual power and worth have absolutely nothing to do with where you were born or the wealth you inherit, but entirely with the effort you put in and the opportunities you create or take for yourself." "But how did he know it would work?" asked Carlos, a 13-year-old boy who was now intensely focused on programming thanks to the new scholarship program. "Why risk everything on a gamble?" Leo looked up from the contracts, his expression thoughtful. "Because I did my research, Carlos. I spent months studying Mr. Al-Zahidi. I didn't just analyze his company, I analyzed him." He looked directly at Omar, who nodded in solemn agreement. "I found out that Mr. Al-Zahidi didn't start as a billionaire," Leo revealed to the group. "He grew up as a poor immigrant child in Lebanon. He arrived in the United States at age 16, barely speaking a word of English, and built his entire empire from absolutely nothing, starting with a single, small investment." Omar nodded, the memory heavy in his eyes. "Leo showed me that I had forgotten my own origins, that I had become exactly the kind of arrogant, discriminating person who had dismissed and looked down on me when I was a young man trying to start out." "And now?" Maria asked, her eyes wide. "Now," Elena replied proudly, walking over and standing beside Omar. "Our company is rapidly becoming one of the most diverse and profitable in the industry. We hire talent based solely on competence, not on your family's last name or the zip code on your college application." Omar stood up and walked toward a bulletin board on the library wall, which now displayed the simple, laminated certificates of the first 50 beneficiaries of the Leo Reyes Young Talent Program. "Do you know what the greatest discovery I've ever made is?" he asked the young, eager faces. "What is it?" they asked in unison. "It's this. When you invest in genuinely talented people, regardless of their background, they don't just grow on their own. They make you grow too. You gain so much more than you give." Leo closed his laptop and joined the group. Mr. Al-Zahidi had every opportunity in the world to become a decent person, a fair leader, he said, looking at the kids, but he almost wasted the greatest opportunity of all because his arrogance blinded him. He needed a wake-up call. "Weren't you afraid of failing, Leo?" Carlos asked, looking at his newfound role model. "Of course I was afraid," Leo admitted honestly. "I was terrified. But my mother taught me something very simple. The biggest failure in life is silently accepting to be treated as less than you are truly worth. I preferred to risk everything, my mother's job, our financial stability, rather than remain invisible and ignored." Omar looked at Leo with genuine, profound admiration. The most impressive thing about Leo wasn't that he spoke 9 languages or analyzed my business plan, which were extraordinary feats. It was that he had the simple, clear courage to confront a powerful man, knowing that if he failed, he could have destroyed his own family's life. "But you had a plan, right?" Maria insisted, still focused on the technical brilliance of the confrontation. Leo smiled, pointing to the scattered certificates. "Always have a plan, and always have quantifiable, undeniable evidence to back up your position. That's how you change the world." Elena stood up, checking her elegant wristwatch. "It's time to go, Leo. We have a meeting with the Japanese investors in 1 hour. You need to prepare your simultaneous translation notes." Omar looked at the young people one last time, a genuine grin on his face. "Want to know the best part of the whole story?" he asked. "Leo now makes more in a month than I did when I was his age, and he earned it. Not through inheritance, not through privilege, but through sheer, measurable merit." As they walked out to the company car, a sleek black Mercedes that Elena now drove with the confidence of an executive, Omar reflected on the complete, absolute transformation of his life and his character. "Leo," he said, sliding into the back seat, "I have one last confession to make." Leo turned to him. "What is it, sir?" "You didn't just save my company from ruin, you saved my soul." Leo stopped walking and looked back at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I was becoming a monster," Omar admitted, his voice quiet and heavy. "Rich, powerful, and utterly empty inside. You forced me to remember that true success isn't about how much you accumulate. It's about how you use your power and privilege to lift others up, not to constantly tear them down." Elena leaned over the seat and kissed her son's forehead with deep pride. "I'm proud of you, baby, not for the money or the recognition, but for the compassionate, strong man you are becoming." "And I," Omar added, putting a respectful hand on Elena's shoulder, "am genuinely honored to have learned from both of you. You taught me that family isn't only about blood. It's about the people in your life who constantly force you and inspire you to be a better person than you were the day before." That afternoon, during the high-stakes meeting with the Japanese investors, Leo sat calmly at the negotiating table. He simultaneously translated a highly complex, technical discussion on renewable energy infrastructure. His performance was flawless, his voice moving seamlessly between English and Japanese, capturing not just the words, but the precise cultural tone and subtle diplomatic nuances required. The negotiations concluded successfully, resulting in a $500 million deal for Al-Zahidi Industries. Omar watched the entire process, utterly captivated, a profound smile etched on his face. He remembered, with a sense of distant horror, the day he had mocked this very same boy. After the deal was finalized and the investors had departed, a reporter from Forbes who had been tracking the company's dramatic turnaround approached them. "Mr. Al-Zahidi," the reporter asked, holding up a microphone, "how does it feel to be the first billionaire CEO in the world, to publicly have a 15-year-old as a key strategic advisor?" Omar smiled broadly. "I feel," he said, his voice carrying the deep conviction of a man reborn, "that I finally understand the true meaning of leadership. It's not about being the smartest person in the room, a mistake I made for decades. It's about recognizing, respecting, and nurturing the extraordinary intelligence of others, no matter where they come from." "And you, Leo," the journalist turned to the boy, "what is your best piece of advice to other young people today who feel that the system is stacked against them?" Leo thought carefully before answering, looking out over the city that had once felt so impossibly distant. "Never, ever let anyone define your worth based on your external appearances, your background, or your immediate circumstances. Your origins do not determine your destiny." He paused, then added, "And always, always have irrefutable evidence, the certificates, the analysis, the receipts, to back up your claims of competence." "One last question," the journalist said, looking from Leo to Elena and then to Omar. "Do you believe this incredible story can genuinely inspire others?" Elena stepped forward, her arms crossed confidently. "This story proves that when you combine undeniable talent with a rare opportunity, and combine the courage to act with meticulous preparation, there is truly no limit to what can happen. We are all living proof of that." Omar nodded, stepping beside her. "Leo taught me that true wealth is not in the material things you selfishly accumulate, but in the potential you build and empower in other people. The smartest investment I have ever made was in human potential." Leo Reyes' story, now legendary within Al-Zahidi Industries and starting to spread across the global business world, was a simple, powerful lesson. Real intelligence knows no color, recognizes no social class, and is never limited by age. Omar had tried to use his massive wealth to arrogantly humiliate those he considered inferior, but he discovered, in the most painful and financially costly way possible, that he had fundamentally and completely underestimated the prepared power of a brilliant, determined mind. He learned that genuine lasting power doesn't flow from the money you possess, but from the good people you choose to invest in, and that sometimes the most profound and valuable lesson of your entire life comes from the person you least expected to teach it. The Young Talent Program flourished under Leo's guidance. It was structured not as charity, but as a merit-based incubator, designed to locate and support students like Maria and Carlos, students who had high aptitude but lacked resources. Leo, balancing his studies and his consulting work with remarkable discipline, spent every Friday afternoon at the public library, mentoring the students, showing them how to access online university resources, and teaching them the subtle nuances of international business language that wasn't taught in schools. Omar, meanwhile, underwent a profound, irreversible shift in his management style. He started hosting weekly open forums for all employees, from the janitorial staff to the senior VPs, actively seeking input and feedback. The toxic culture of fear and discrimination was slowly replaced by an atmosphere of genuine meritocracy. He personally ensured that the company's hiring and promotion metrics were entirely overhauled, focusing on measurable competence rather than arbitrary demographics. Within a year, Al-Zahidi Industries became known in the industry as a benchmark for diverse, high-performing talent. Elena Reyes, now a well-respected executive, was instrumental in this change, ensuring that the company's new policies were fair and implemented at every level. The initial fear that the 3 digital recorders might be used vanished. Leo had never intended to destroy Omar's company, only to shock it, and the man who ran it, back to a sense of justice and purpose. The recordings remained safely stored, not as weapons, but as symbols of the turning point, a permanent reminder of the stakes involved. On his 16th birthday, Leo and Elena were at a celebration dinner hosted by Omar at a much more modest but highly acclaimed restaurant downtown, a far cry from the glittering penthouse. "Leo," Omar said, raising a glass of sparkling water, "I have been doing some thinking about your long-term future. Your analysis skills are invaluable. I want to offer you a full scholarship, paid for by the foundation, not the company, to any university you want, anywhere in the world, Harvard, Oxford, Tokyo University, whatever your heart desires." Leo smiled, taking a sip of his water. "Thank you, Mr. Al-Zahidi. That is a generous offer." "But," Omar prompted, recognizing the slight hesitation. "But I've already applied to the New York University School of Professional Studies," Leo said, "for their accelerated program in global management and linguistic strategy. It allows me to take online university classes while still consulting for you and finishing my high school diploma simultaneously. It saves time, and it's local." Omar shook his head, a look of genuine awe on his face. "Of course you did. Always thinking 3 steps ahead, Leo. Always finding the most efficient path." "The goal is impact, not just prestige, sir," Leo clarified. "The faster I can build my knowledge, the faster I can use it to help the foundation grow and help more kids like Carlos and Maria. That's the true return on investment." Elena watched the 2 men, the seasoned billionaire and the teenage genius, talking about global strategy and impact, and she felt a wave of serene happiness wash over her. It wasn't just the money or the status. It was the recognition that her son had forced the world, or at least one tiny, powerful corner of it, to acknowledge the brilliance she had always known was there. She was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was the mother of a man who had changed a titan. Later that week, Leo was back in the Bronx Public Library, sitting with a new group of scholarship applicants. He was demonstrating how he uses a simple, free language app to rapidly acquire conversational fluency, before moving to the advanced formal structures. A shy young woman named Sophia asked him a difficult question. "What if you had failed, Leo? What if Mr. Al-Zahidi had just fired your mother and gone to court and you lost?" Leo closed his laptop, his eyes serious. "Then we would have been exactly where we were before, just looking for another job. But he would have had that recording, and he would have known, for the rest of his life, that he was morally wrong, and that his multi-billion-dollar empire was only one push of a button away from utter ruin." He paused, looking directly at Sophia. "The point isn't the victory, Sophia. The point is the courage to stand up and say, 'My value is real, and I will not let you pretend it doesn't exist.' That is the true power, and nobody can take that away from you. Never let their perception become your reality." Leo opened his laptop again, ready to begin the day's lesson on the subtle difference between Russian formal address and informal conversation. The the keys to unlocking a whole new world of business opportunities for his students. The work was just beginning, and he was ready for it.